Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Time. My name is Lamar Soutter. Thank you for joining us. We have more breaking news. A passenger plane, a Ukrainian passenger plane, has been shot down near Tehran. This has just happened. We honestly have no real details right now on it. And we are trying to obtain those. Normally a passenger, oh Jesus, I am tired, so you will have to forgive me. I think I said a passenger plane was shot down near Tehran, and that is not a fact. A passenger plane has crashed near Tehran. So let me repeat that. A passenger plane, a Ukrainian passenger plane, has crashed outside of Tehran. Now, The reason for the slip is because I do have to admit that while we don't know the cause of the crash, there is considerable concern. The last time we were here with all of you pleasant folks, which was a delightful almost 60 minutes ago, we knew that there were planes in the air that were not accounted for, and we had said we're going to go to bed. We don't think anything's going to happen. I mean, warplanes in the air. Whoa, what's the big deal with that? And last we were speaking with you, our audience, we knew that planes had been scrambled out of the UAE, and they were American planes. We have an air base in the UAE, and we scrambled planes. Ostensibly, those planes were for a CAP, a combat air patrol, to protect our air bases, which had come under fire. We believe we have had reports that it was 3 air bases. Donald Trump, in a tweet, suggested it was only 2. I personally believe I believe the news over Trump. So it looks like we're going to stick with 3 air bases have been attacked. At a minimum, we know 2 have, and we have multiple reputable news sources saying it was 3. At any rate, a number of bases in Iraq in the green zone have been attacked by missiles. We covered that story live, and when the second of the attacks seemed to have ended and the Ayatollah said there would be no more attacks so long as the U.S. did not retaliate, we headed home for the night. We then discovered that a Ukrainian passenger plane had crashed outside of Tehran. At that moment, we knew of at least 1 U.S. patrol and what appeared to be an Iranian patrol, which had gone into Iraqi airspace. We do not know what has happened to that plane. It fell out of the sky. It is entirely possible that it was an accident hopefully it was an accident, but it's entirely possible that there was a mechanical failure and that the plane simply crashed on its own. Planes do crash. They crash at sometimes very bizarre times, and times where you sit there and say, oh my God, something must have. But having said that, I find the chances rather strong that that plane was probably shot down. We have 2 hostile forces, or two forces that were hostile to each other, the United States and Iran. There had been not an exchange, there had been an attack on a U.S. airbase. Patrols from both sides had been in the air, and now a Ukrainian passenger plane appears to have crashed outside of Tehran, which is ostensibly in the danger area. Now, Tehran is the capital of Iran, and it is unlikely our planes would have entered Iranian airspace, I think, unless, and we did discuss this possibility, unless the ones that launched from the UAE were not a combat air patrol, but actually a retaliatory strike force that was ready to immediately respond. We do sometimes do that, especially if we are quite sure an attack was imminent. That is possible. Like I said, also combat air patrol is standard operating procedures when one of our bases comes under an attack. So it's very difficult to tell what happened. If that patrol actually went into went into Iranian airspace, that would be a rather significant violation of their airspace and another act of war, which is coming commonplace in these days. If it did a combat patrol, then this would most likely have been done by the Iranians if in fact it was shot down. I don't think they would have done that deliberately. The Ukraine has no duck in this hunt that I am aware of. We are going to try to get more information for you. But the fact that it was in Iran, there are plenty of missiles that could easily cross that distance if they were fired from Iraq. So the fact that this was in Tehran or near Tehran does not mean that it was the Iranians that shot it down. It could have been shot down by the Americans. It may have been shot down by the Iranians, or it may have come out of the sky for completely unrelated reasons. It also may have been any kind of anti-aircraft if that plane were mistaken for a combat plane. It may have also been shot down by regular anti-aircraft. So as opposed to being shot down air to air, by the planes that we know were there. It may have been shot down by a anti-aircraft, where the Iranians may have mistaken that craft for an attack aircraft. They would easily have known that we had planes in the air. A, they have radar. B, they have CNN. So it is interesting. We don't know yet. Now, I do have some new information coming in here. It was a Ukrainian Boeing 737-800. It was carrying 180 passengers and crew. It crashed near an airport at the capital in Tehran. Now, we don't have any word on casualties, and I have to admit I'm somewhat pleased that it happened near the airport, because if it happened near the airport, that does increase the chances that this was an accident. And by an accident, I don't mean even like a military accident, but some kind of there was a mechanical failure on the plane. It was a Boeing 737-800, which I do not believe falls under the most recent recall, meaning it is not one of the planes that we know is prone to crashing due to a conflict between pilots and the autopilot, which would take over unexpectedly. This plane, I don't believe, is of that kind that was subject to those faults. So again, I've seen weirder coincidences, but not many. And we have decided to go live with this because a Ukrainian plane falling out of the sky in Tehran while hostile warplanes are in the vicinity is, I think, breaking news. The Ukraine is a breakaway republic from the former Soviet Union and the current Russia. And Russia is not very pleased with the Ukraine. The Ukraine is not very pleased with Russia. Last year, or no, actually, oh wow, time flies when you're having fun with your president. Several years ago, the Crimea, which is a section of the Ukraine that originally belonged to Russia, they returned it to Crimea. They returned Crimea to the Ukraine. They had taken it. They returned it. They said the Ukraine could have it, and Vladimir Putin, many years later, said, no, we're taking it back. And they annexed the Crimea. They currently own Crimea. As far as they're concerned, they will never give it back. It is a fiat complete. They own it. They are not returning it. Most world organizations do not recognize their occupation of the Crimea as legitimate. They view it as an occupation, but nobody can dislodge them. NATO is not going to go to war with it. The Ukraine has fought battles over it, but they have been repelled really extraordinarily easily, and they're not getting it back. They don't want to go to war with it. They could lose the entire Ukraine. So the Ukrainians have absolutely no love for the Russians. In fact, I speak Russian. I have spoken with Ukrainians on occasion. Ukrainian and Russian is close enough that you can communicate. And boy, did I realize that if it's between speaking Russian to them and not communicating at all, they're okay with silence. The Russians are absolutely loathed over there. So now I do apologize. We have a few technical issues. We had to change systems, and we're in the middle of some system upgrades. And I know this is going to sound really stupid, but we didn't really think there was going to be another breaking news story tonight. We were joking about it, like, wouldn't it be funny? We're like, no, it's really, and there was a lot of wish thinking there. So I am going to take a minute. I don't actually have immediate access to the live chat. I will catch up with it in a minute. But these systems, Ansgar is usually producing for us, and he's unavailable at the moment. So lucky I get to be a producer today, which is delightful. But on the flip side, I'm going to sort of have to produce and carry things and try not to expose all of our secret codes on the back end right onto Ansgar's screen, which I am not kidding. I did literally 2 seconds before going live. So I'm going to try to deal with that. We do have Kitty, as usual, in the live chat, and she's managing things, and hopefully she can feed me some stuff too, because I can sort of see the live chat on the thing here, but I can't access the back end without it popping up on the screen and actually being broadcast, which would be cute. And we also have Dave McGinnis, we're switching the system over. really, like tomorrow or the next day, we're completely switching the system over, so Dave's running it, and so I don't have to do this. And I'm thinking we decided to do the changeover a day too late. But at any rate, once again, for those of you who are just joining us, we have breaking news that a passenger plane, a Ukrainian Boeing, hold on one second, a Boeing 737 carrying 180 passengers has crashed outside of Tehran. It crashed near the airport. We do not know anything other than that. There is very strong reason to believe that both Iran and the U.S. had military warplanes in the air at the time. We do not know how far or in what airspace. We do know that what was ostensibly a combat air patrol launched from the UAE and presumably went to fly a combat air patrol over U.S. bases, 3 of which were attacked by missiles from Iran. We also know that I believe it was 2 Iranian warplanes went into Iraqi airspace from Iran, and we do not know if they engaged, and we do not know. We literally know nothing else. This is breaking news. That's the fun thing about breaking news is I get to tell you everything I know about it, which takes about 2.5 seconds. But we do have a little more information. It looks like most, if not all, of those aboard the Ukraine International Airlines flight has died. This is according to the head of Iran's emergency medical services. They have dispatched emergency medical crews, but the area is still ablaze. Flight tracking service radar has said that the jet has been in service for about 3.5 years. And so far, the ISNA is reporting that the crash was due to technical difficulties. If so, I do apologize for waking everybody up with a notification of a plane crash, and I do hope that you understand. That is, I'm cautiously optimistic. The ISNA, I actually don't know what that organization is. International Sleep Needed by Authors. No, that's not what that means. I'm going to have to figure out what INSA means, but I can tell things are going off in our live chat, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take a minute here, and actually I'm hoping, oh, there is actually another way. I'm going to try to get some access to the live chat here because, hey, I would like to yell at people. There are certain people I kind of like regularly yell at in the live chat. And that includes, Tony and all the regulars. And I feel kind of, I get very uncomfortable when I realize that Tony could be in the live chat completely unchallenged. And so I want to see, and we do have some marvelous software here for the kind of stuff that we're doing, but they keep changing it on us. And because of that, I never know where anything is. And what I do actually, Ansgar Odinson is my co-host, and he usually is the one running the streams in the background. And I like to tell him that basically anybody could do his job, and I could replace him with a chimpanzee. And if a chimpanzee wasn't available, I could probably do it with a potted plant. And if a potted plant wasn't available, I could probably do it with Trump. But truth be told, I've run a couple of these things, and I know it takes a little more work than that. But and no, I'd believe a potted plant could do it before Trump. But at any rate, I know we're supposed to be impartial, but if I'm here streaming, my bedroom is up there. I'd have to walk around to get to it. But technically it's about 4 feet away up there. I could be asleep right now, but because there's a tangerine in office who's reactionary to absolutely everything, I'm here to, and don't get me wrong, I love our audience. Oh dear Lord. So what I'm going to do now is, and then I just heard a bell in my ear, and sometimes that bell means that somebody has entered the green room where we do the staging for all of this stuff. And only two people could enter the green room, and one of them is Ansgar. And if it's Ansgar, I'm going to be like, "Oh, dude, this was real easy. Could you please take it over for me, man? Because I don't know what I'm doing." Um, but until then, let's see. We have the INSA, Intelligence National Security Alliance, who I've never heard of, but apparently they are reporting that this was a technical issue. So again, for those of us just joining, for those of you just joining us, what we have at the present moment has been, unfortunately, a bit of a difficult day. It, the day itself started with, aside from Trump saying um, he would not honor Iraq's demand that we withdraw from the country, and saying that he would stay, and then modifying that to say that, well, gee, we'll leave if they pay us. Admittedly, for the bases, but A, I'm sure that's going to get added to all sorts of other things, and B, uh, he's really not empowered to do that, and they want us out. They want us out. We can negotiate the basis later, but they're presumably a sovereign nation. 4,000 Americans died to make them a sovereign nation. I don't think we get to say we're staying. So the deal on the base isn't getting paid. That's a whole other thing. But then again, they were supposed to pay us with their oil for the invasion. So at any rate. It started with that, and then it went to rhetoric that Donald Trump would attack the cultural sites, 52 cultural sites in Iran. 52 is a significant number because it is a reference to the 52 hostages held by Iran during the Iranian hostage crisis 40 years ago. So he's still pissed about something that happened when he was 13. And then Iran launched a series of rockets, somewhere between 12 and several dozen rockets, on what appears to be 2 or 3 military bases in Iraq. These were U.S. bases. They were in the green zone. There are casualties. Right now, the casualties appear to be between 24 and 30 U.S. casualties. We don't know how many are civilian and how many are um, military. What we do know is that they were inside the green zone and that they were on U.S. military bases. A military base is actually American soil, so this was an attack on the United States. The United States has been attacked before. People do throw rockets at those, so that's not necessarily, the hugest let's go to war, but let's agree and understand that they were attacking the United States of America. They were attacking American soil, even if it was in Iran. Our response, there hasn't been one yet, but Trump is in office, so I suspect there will be. The Ayatollah of Iran has said they will. The attacks are done. They did 2 rounds of attacks. They are done, and they said they will not do any more attacks so long as the United States does not retaliate for this action. I find that highly unlikely that the United States will not retaliate for this action. So the question is, what happens next? The United States scrambled what I believe was a combat air patrol out of UAE. Meanwhile, at a minimum, 2 Iranian jets flew into Iraqi airspace. I don't think they had. I don't understand any reasons other than hostility for them to be doing that. So we had 2. Um, we're pretty close to war. It's hard to say we're not at war with Iran. So 2 potentially warring factions in the air, and then about 90 minutes later, in that vicinity, a passenger jet fell out of the sky in the airport just outside of fell on the airport just outside of Tehran. And there was a ding in the green room. I thought it was Ansgar to meet me, and I was wrong, and I have never been so happy to be wrong. We have Dr. Misha Griffith with us. She has agreed once again to join us. I hope for those of you who are seeing her here for the first time, you do not take her appearance here as any kind of slight on her intelligence or her sanity. I suspect it's a pity case, but she keeps coming back, and we always appreciate it. So I'm going to start getting her set up. She's actually got a lot to say. She's got a lot to say about some of the other things that we've discussed and unfortunately have not really been able to cover, uh, in large part due to the, uh, or sorry, haven't been able to cover with her, largely due to us being busy. So, and I do think, and she's appeared just a slight touch bigger. This is why, hey, so we won't tell her. That'll be our little secret. Nothing, absolutely nothing. Um, since I hadn't set this up beforehand, I've got a number of windows, and you were projected not into the main screen, but basically full screen all over everything. So, but that was just for a second. So this is all right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put Dr. Griffith up here, and then hopefully, actually, shortly after that, I may even be able to join the live chat. But I'm going to put her up, and she's going to be really big for a second, but that's okay because she's really important. So let me see if I can, and now of course I can't even get it back up that way. Oh, and I know why. There's always something. How are you doing? And I think probably nobody can hear you at this point. Could you just give me a audio test there? Well, and I sincerely appreciate that. Now, actually, nobody else can hear you because this is the way this is set up. So this is Ansgar and I share the and you're going to be hot here in just a second. So let me, in fact, if I've done this right, you are now hot. Could you speak again? Yeah, you are not. So I'm working on this. We Ansgar and I share, and I know why you're not. Ansgar and I share um, the software so that during breaking news, either one of us can go live without the other one in case one of us is not available. And
Sure.
soon David will also have that. So there's actually three different things, and the copies are synced. But all of this goes, right now it's set all to his audio settings, but since I don't have the same equipment, it's not recognizing. But you should be live now. So do you want to say hi to the
Okay.
audience? Oh yeah,
Hello, everybody. Am I audible now?
you should be. This tells me you are.
Okay.
I can't see the live
Let
chat,
me
but
see. I'm curious to see if I am audible or not.
you are.
I'm going to give you a microphone check. Check one, two, three, four. Oh, I am so
You are a
dependable
pro
about that.
now. You are. That's it.
So,
Well, the problem is now that you're a pro, you're not going to want to come onto
Your
our
mic is
show
hot.
anymore.
no, no, no. I'm questioning. Is it a problem on my end?
Oh, no, I can hear you. And then what happens is the audio levels that are going out filter through here, and I can see them, and the audio is going out. So, why is
Okay.
somebody saying they can't hear you?
Oh, no.
They can. Yeah,
They're
she's
saying that
live
they
now.
can hear me now.
Yep, there was a delay because there is of course a delay between, and my software isn't
Right.
optimized, so there's a bit of an even longer delay here than on Ansgar. But you're gonna tell Ansgar that I'm like totally a pro, right? And that this was like there were
I,
no
I,
hiccups.
I wouldn't dream of saying anything different.
Thank you. And then I'm going to get it so they can see you in a minute. But until then, this is Dr. Misha Griffith. She is a very good friend of the show, but at least as importantly, she is also a very important guest, and we have her as a correspondent. We have a number of correspondents. ProLib is, of course, one for especially for political issues. Dr. Misha Griffith is our historian and has been very gracious in coming during breaking news. And we have Ozzy. For those of you who don't know, and he was on our thing, he is our philosopher correspondent. We've never had any philosophy breaking news. So when he said he was willing to do that, I'm thinking he was a little disingenuous because I'm suddenly realizing, wait a minute, when are we going to have an emergency phone call with a philosopher? All right, but thank you very much for joining us. And could you give us a
Now,
little bit?
Nick,
Yes.
Nick, now you know how I feel when I hear someone on an airplane, a flight attendant on an airplane say, "Is there a doctor on the plane?" And
Well, yes, but
yeah, but
this man's having a heart attack. Oh, well, the history of heart attacks is as follows. Um, oh, all right.
okay.
So, what do we have? Where are we? And what on earth is going on? Because people are looking at me like I know something.
Armageddon.
Armageddon.
We are at
Well,
the
good.
end of the world.
Okay. Well, that's what I've been saying. So finally, somebody
You
agrees
know,
with me. Um, uh,
um,
yeah. What do you think?
I, I, it sucks to be an Iranian today. My gosh, how much abuse can they take? Uh, I was chatting earlier, and we were when we were talking about the live news about the missiles coming coming out of Iran and hitting the U.S. Bunkers or the U.S. barracks. Well, whatever the camps.
Yep.
And from what I read, there were very few Americans in the camps. These were camps that Americans had been in. One of the camps was full of Germans.
Oh,
Um,
Jesus.
and they're okay, but they're evacuating right now. Almost all of the NATO troops that are in Iraq, or yes, Iraq, are evacuating right now. Uh, but this plane crash is beyond bizarre. Uh, as
Yeah.
far as the BBC is saying, that they're basically saying that it was a plane crash, that there is it's they're not sure if it's linked. Um, and that the plane is on fire, uh,
Can you turn Dr.
but
Misha's
it
audio up a
doesn't
little
look
bit?
very good for what's happened with the plane. And as you said, that 737 is not a 737 MAX, which were the planes that had the problems with the weight distribution.
Yes.
Seven, seven 737s had they had a really good safety record, and then they installed bigger engines on them. And these bigger engines put the plane off of balance. And so there was software installed to rebalance the airplane. But the pilots, many of the pilots were not notified that in fact they had to do something different while they were flying the plane because professional pilots qualify on the planes. It's not like one day they can fly a 747 and the next day they're flying an Airbus 380. They qualify on certain planes and fly those planes routinely.
Hmm.
So if the plane and the software has changed and no one's told them, that's a little problematic.
And
Um,
if I recall, what would happen is I'm sorry. We're getting some pretty interesting video of what appears to be the plane actually going down. So I'm going to work on that for a minute. But if I recall correctly, what had happened was the autopilot was designed to correct for that imbalance and would start to
right.
kick in. The pilots were not properly trained to be aware of it, and they would start to fight the autopilot. And then it
Right.
really became a fight for control. And they didn't even know the autopilot had taken over. If they'd known that, they
Yes.
could have either adjusted or adapted, but they were not properly trained. And then they began to fight the autopilot, and that was causing these crashes under certain conditions.
And it was just a couple hours of training on their iPads would take care of it. But of course, there's a lot of those 737 Maxes out there, or were. And so getting everyone trained was going to be a problem. So it didn't happen as efficiently as it could have.
All right, so but this doesn't appear to have been one of those planes, and you've pointed out sort of what's concerning me, which is, I mean, I think it's interesting. So far, we have an organization that I actually don't know, but seems reasonably official, who is saying that it went down because of technical difficulties. I have never heard a declaration of that this quickly after a plane crash. I'm thinking of the most recent Russian plane crash. They didn't know that for days. I mean, usually, I mean, of course, it's a technical, but I mean, these things go down. Nobody says what it is right away. they're saying it's technical difficulties less than half an hour after this plane has crashed. That I find
Mhm.
interesting, in addition to the fact that we know there were combat planes in the area, hostile combat planes in the area. So now you had said you were a bit bothered
Yeah.
by it. So what are you thinking?
Um, just because the timing is really bad, having the fact that it is a Ukrainian based jet
Hmm.
is to my mind is suspicious. Um, remember, you've got Iran and Russia are now in a way allies. I do not think that they are fully uh, allies in terms of all of the protocols and papers have been signed, but having it a Ukrainian jet go down, announcing it was technical difficulties a half an hour after it uh, actually hit the ground, there's way too much suspicious stuff happening.
Now,
Um,
so why? So we know Russia and now even China, unfortunately, are pretty good allies with Iran. Well, pretty good allies. They agreed to do combat maneuvers together,
right.
which is concerning.
Yeah.
Now, I see three possibilities, and I'd like to run over what you think about the possibilities. And there's a lot of other stuff to cover if you have the time. But the three possibilities I see, or actually like four, five, six. Wow. Okay, let's assume it was not a technical difficulty for a second. Let's take that off the table. That is a possibility. We'll drop it. In terms of military possibilities, A, the Iranians mistook this for a hostile jet or hostile plane in their territory, and they shot it down with anti-aircraft because they knew there were hostile planes in the vicinity. Whether or not U.S. violated their airspace, we do not yet know, but we do know U.S. Warplanes were in the vicinity. So A,
And
it was shot.
and let me
Yes, please.
right, and let me add something to that. That's where the Russians come in. Remember the flight that came out of the Netherlands that was heading to somewhere in the South Pacific that was shot down over Ukraine
Yes.
a few years ago? That was shot down by Russian anti-aircraft missiles, not missiles, rockets that the Russians had gotten into the Donbass region to help the anti-Ukrainian fighters.
All right. So are you? I don't suppose you're thinking this is retaliation.
I don't know. I don't know. What I'm saying is that if it was indeed shot down, and if we see a connection between Russia and Iran, this is just me coming
Yeah.
up with all of the variables that we can possibly think of. Um, that has happened in the past. So
Yes.
so I was just going to put out that variable as
We've
as saying it's not beyond um, a reasonable doubt.
passenger jets have been shot down in the past by accident and on occasion we suspect almost on purpose.
Yeah.
So the possibilities I see in terms of if this plane did not go down as a result of technical difficulties. A, it was shot down by anti-aircraft, ground to air. Maybe, and we'll discuss how or why that might have happened.
Check Twitter DM.
Mhm.
B, it was shut down. It was shot down by the Iranians. C, it was shot down by the U.S. So, what do you think might be the motives for any one of those? And if it was any of those, what do you think the possible consequences might be? So let's start for a second. Let's get back to the first one, which would be just anti-aircraft, which I think is a reasonably likely one, except this happened near the airport, so that you'd think that'd be pretty clear on this. But um, let's
Did it
so
happen exactly at the airport, or was there a little bit of space? And remember, that airport is going to be very heavily guarded uh,
Also, could
in
it have happened
case
from the
of
inside of the plane?
incoming American bombers.
I'm sorry, repeat that.
Sure, that airport is going to be extraordinarily heavily guarded by the Iranians in case of incoming American bombers
Yes, yes.
and drones.
So they're going to have more anti-aircraft than almost any other spot because they know that we're going to want to take that out first.
Yes.
All right.
The only option you didn't mention is the fact it could have been taken down by somebody inside the plane.
Aircraft, uh, airports are very high target areas.
And there was actually one other possibility I hadn't mentioned.
Mhm.
And let me just catch that. If I could get a repeat on that.
Could be somebody inside the plane.
Oh, which?
Or it could have been somebody inside the plane was another, but that was a, sorry, I have a
Dave and I are coming through.
that was something
Stuff coming in. Yeah.
Yeah, there is stuff coming in, so it's pretty
Coming
pretty
through.
busy. So what we do know, we know a few things. There's also been a few corrections. I guess it was actually a 737-800, and it was an older model, but I believe it was still in service for 3 years, which these planes stay in service for a lot longer and are perfectly fine.
Oh, yeah.
That type was grounded in March after 2 fatal crashes in the space of 5 months.
Okay, so it was a MAX.
Yeah, 737. Okay, so it may well be the kind that was grounded.
Right.
737, and Boeing has made a statement. They said they are aware of the crash, and they are gathering more information. Now,
No, it's saying it wasn't a Max.
I apologize.
It was an older model of 737, not the 737.
I had misread that, so it was an older model. It was a 737. It was not the Max. So this was not the Max.
Okay.
This was not the kind that had the most serious issues that we are talking about. It was a flight from Tehran to Kiev. It was a Ukrainian plane. Now, I have video, and I'm going to try to get it up in a few minutes, but I have video that's on Twitter, which is our top source for bleeding edge information that you know is completely reliable, has never been faked, and probably therefore is coming directly out of the White House because that's where the president releases all his information. But the video that I just saw looked like a fireball coming out of the sky. That was not an airplane. That was an airplane that looked. That was a fireball coming out of the sky, is what I just saw. So I would like to take a second look at that. But please, Doctor, what were you going to say?
Sure. Well, the question is, if it's a fireball coming out of the sky, something happened to it in flight.
Yes.
Whether it was a bomb on board or hit by something, planes don't just spontaneously combust while in flight.
No, you don't normally see that kind of behavior in a 737. They do work hard to avoid that. All right, so anti-aircraft. You made an excellent point, which is that's going to be one of the most heavily defended, and they're going to be on the lookout for enemy planes. Having said that, they're also going to be on the lookout for passenger planes, and they presumably are experts at differentiating between the two. So it may have gone down by anti-aircraft. What do you think? The next possibility that I have to think about now, you're aware that there was planes that were scrambled from the UAE. Now,
No, I hadn't heard this.
well, this was a while back. So what you might want to do is there's a news show on YouTube, and they cover things like this. And if you watch them regularly, you stay up to date on things. I'm just saying, just so you know. And the hosts are great. One's really handsome, and the other one wears a hat. I'm sorry, what?
The hosts are really handsome, but I thought you said that there were jets scrambled from the UAE.
There
Is
were
that correct?
the U.S. base in UAE
So
shortly
US
after the
base in
attacks.
UAE. Okay.
Shortly after the initial attacks on the air bases in the U.S. Or sorry, there were bases. I don't know if they were air bases, but Tehran launched missiles into Iraq, striking what we believe to be 3 air bases in the Green Zone. Now, shortly after that, fighters launched from the UAE. They were U.S. fighters launching from an American base in the UAE. We do not know what their purpose was. My assumption is that it's probably a CAP, a combat air patrol, designed to protect the air bases. Whenever there's any kind of an attack, the first thing they do is establish air superiority and establish a combat air patrol, and there is a plane over that area in perpetuity until the danger is over. But we do not know that it was a cap. That is my assumption. It may also have been to either retaliate, attack back if the U.S. was anticipating this. Maybe they had a rapid attack plan in response. I do not know. We don't know what happened to those planes. We don't know into which airspace they entered. All we know is they scrambled out of the UAE. Shortly thereafter, two Iranian planes, presumably MiGs, entered the Iraqi airspace. We also don't know what happened to them or what they were up to. So we have no idea. Presumably, when we stopped broadcasting about an hour ago, they were still in the air. My concern was that they were going to engage. If you have a cap over an American airbase in Iraq and a MiG enters that airspace, they will engage it if there's already been an attack. But we have heard no word. We exited the stream and then found out about this.
Right. If there was a dogfight or something like that, if there was a question that there would be hostilities in the air, they wouldn't have released a civilian passenger jet to fly over that area or anywhere around that area. So
I'm sorry, repeat that one more time.
obviously,
If there was a yes.
if there was a if there was any chance of hostilities happening, why would they have released a passenger jet to take off and leave Tehran?
That's a really good question. That's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that.
And also, I want to bring up another point. It was about 20 years ago. I know you were probably way too young to remember it. Uh,
I
the
wish.
American the American Navy shot down an Iranian um, passenger by accident. I don't know if
Ooh,
you recall that.
I don't. I
Yeah,
don't.
we did. It was very embarrassing, and it was from an Iran with our boats in the Gulf of Straits of Hormuz and in the Arabian Sea. So that's something else to consider.
All right. So yeah, this is I'm gonna go out on a limb. I do not I can I see no way this was a a failure, a mechanical failure. Um, if this was taken out, let's assume for a second that this was anti-aircraft and they took it out. Because you're
Hmm.
right, that's another thing. I can't believe I didn't think of that. But why are they launching civilian aircraft with known? Because that plane was bound for Kiev, so it was coming out of the Iranian
Out of
airport, out of Tehran, with known hostiles in the area. Um,
right.
in,
Okay,
yeah.
The Iranian flight that was shot down on July 3rd of 1988. Iranian Air Flight 655. It was from Tehran to Dubai, and it was shot down by a surface-to-air missile from the Vincennes, the USS Vincennes, guided missile cruiser of the U.S. Navy. It was an Airbus A300, and it destroyed and killed all 290 people aboard.
All right. Now,
So,
okay, so we can do that if we want to from the water, and we do have ships in the area. So it is possible. So that is a decent fourth possibility that it was shot down by ship to air, which
yep,
would have probably been the U.S.
right.
If the Iranians took this down,
Hmm.
what do you think that means? And we're gonna say, so you're on our air. So what I'm going to say is our
Okay.
position is this is a very big if. Your position is this is exactly what happened. You're going out. You're completely. I'm going to throw you
No,
totally under the.
no,
Yeah,
I
okay.
am way out on a limb here. I am just going through some possibilities in my head, and historical precedents that has gone before to see where this fits in. It doesn't make sense as being something shot down on purpose. It makes very good sense for something being shot down on accident. Because we have way too many, we have three nations right now. We've got Iran, Iraq, and the United States, all three of which are trying to defend their airspace.
Hmm.
Um, but why would they have sent a passenger jet if there was a hint of danger involved?
So ostensibly, it sounds like what you're suggesting is you think it was probably more likely than not an accident.
I think
If
so.
if this wasn't a mechanical failure, which I have a very hard time thinking it was one, if it wasn't a
Mhm.
mechanical failure, your thinking was probably an accident. Now, one of two sides then probably did the accident. I'm going to start with the Iranians because I think that would be most likely. They're the ones who um, were anticipating an attack by us. They knew that there were hostile forces in the area, and I see no evidence that we invaded their airspace. We could have shot it down without having gone into their airspace through a ship, as you suggest. But I'm not sure we'd have cause to do that, and I think we would take out the airplanes that were over Iraq first, and there's no indication there was a dogfight. So let's assume maybe it was anti-aircraft.
Mhm.
Um, uh, Anti-aircraft shoot this down. My assumption is Trump is going to say, "Look at how horrible these people are. They've uh, they're shooting down passenger jets, and we've told you they're completely evil." And he's going to run that kind of narrative. What kind of position do you think this puts them in?
Well, right now Trump's asleep. Um, but this is just this to my mind is just weird. Um, and you could probably chalk it up like so many other weird disasters that happened during wartime as somebody goofed.
Yeah.
Um, and as a historian, I don't like to get into people's heads
Mm,
to try to think about what are their intentions.
yep.
So I'm just kind of trying to come up with possibilities that have historical precedents in mind, because it
During
doesn't make sense for them to shoot it down.
during the Cuban Missile Crisis, if I recall, there was an accidental escalation by the U.S. where we actually started firing unauthorized on a ship, and I think we were firing warning shots across the bow, but that hadn't been authorized. And in fact, Kennedy was against doing that and became really quite upset when it happened because it accidentally indicated a escalation of the crisis where we were not yet actually prepared to fire on ships that were going to break the blockade. Um, is it now? That's the kind of thing where we said it was an accident, and the Soviets were like, we don't necessarily believe you. But these kind of accidents actually really, I mean, there are accidents that happen all the time, and we everybody makes mistakes, even during
Mhm.
wartime. But that's when you don't trust whether or not it was. So if it's an accident, I mean, Trump is going to wake up and he's going to be told about this. It is very hard to guess what he's going to do, except I'm kind of leaning towards he's going to really try to turn this into a political opportunity.
I don't know. I don't know how much more.
Hello all and welcome back to In Time. I sincerely apologize for that. We're having some technical difficulties. I think everything has been restored, and I am getting a bit of an echo here, so I think Mr. McGinnis will, there you go, perfect, thank you. So everything's been restored. We are back with Dr. Griffith. I think you and I both agree there's probably no way it was technical difficulties or an accident. Donald Trump did in fact kill our stream. He does not approve of the news getting out, but we are back. and broadcasting live. So where were we with this? And I think I'm gonna check on a little more information, but I'm gonna try to be a little more present with you. I apologize. I also wanted to fix some audio difficulties, but I think we've gotten around it now. So we're back. Everything's good. We were talking, and I'd also like to get a little bit into the history of this region, especially the Kurds and the. Sorry, I'm a little tired. Dr. Griffith. Oh, okay. I do want to get a bit into the also the history with the Kurds and the. So where were we when we got cut off? If you remember, because I actually don't. I apologize. Oh, so well, and you're not, yeah, you're not because I forgot that the settings did not save. So I appreciate being notified of that. That's an easy fix. Yep, yep. And that should correct the problem. I believe we have audio with you now. Could you give me just a say? Why don't
Okay.
you say
How are we doing?
Nick Soutter is the best host I've ever seen. Could we start with
I'm
that?
sorry, my headphones aren't working right.
Oh, okay, that's how it is. Well, it does appear like we're getting sound out. Thank you, Doctor. It's always a
You're
delight
welcome.
having
You're
you on. Oh. So, all right. So you were saying that, Nick, you were right when you said it must be an accident, and I'm so. So, and I guess you're a little quiet, so we'll get that fixed. But so you were
no.
just explaining how I was right.
Yeah, you were right. That we were offline for a few moments, and
Oh my
I'm
God!
thrilled that our audience is still here. It's late.
Oh, it's been a difficult day. It's been
We
okay.
have
Serenity now.
You have done four. This is your fourth show today.
I think
This
so,
is
and one of them was 3 hours.
insane. Oh.
But you're here now, so everything's okay. So you were saying when you were muted, which may happen again depending on your
Right.
behavior. I'm just saying. You were saying while you were muted that it doesn't make sense to you that there's no political reason to shoot down, I think, that you can think of, a Ukrainian passenger jet, and that it sounds like an accident, although admittedly, and again, we don't know it was shot down. It went down.
Right.
One agency has said that it was an accident, but even that's suspicious because you don't normally declare those things 12 minutes into it going down. And I do have a little more information I'm going to get to on that. But
And
if
we
it went,
should.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So if it went down, I think it was probably what you're suggesting is that it was probably an accident. Because there's no real political reason to do it. And these kind of accidents do happen, but it still is rather bizarre. I think that's what you said.
Stay informed.
Yeah.
With
There's many different possibilities, but you're saying that the video was a fireball coming out of the sky. So obviously
So Fred,
something happened when it was up in the sky, whether it was a bomb on the inside, something shooting at it from the outside, or even if there was a drone up there that got sucked into its engine. I mean, there's a huge number of possibilities with what could have happened.
All right. So now, could you tell us a little bit about the difference between the Shia and the Sunni and how that affects
And then also to
Because
First
display
you
their
wanted the
anger,
history of the Kurds, now you want the Shia Sunni
well, okay, the Kurds aren't as
situation.
involved in this one. I'm sorry. It's been like 12 hours of
Oh
constant
no.
screaming. So we've
No,
been talking
okay.
about, yeah. So there's
Yeah,
also
I
sectarian
Nick,
issues.
I
you're
wanted
piping CNN through to the stream.
All right. Well, I just wanted to. I'm getting CNN in my ears from somewhere, and I think it's being broadcast. Dr. Griffith, are you playing CNN possibly?
no, I do not have CNN on.
All right. Okay. I think I may know where it's coming from, and I apologize. So you were saying
Atlanta. It's coming from Atlanta.
it's coming from.
Sorry.
It's coming from
No,
Atlanta.
okay.
You know.
Something
Okay. Hold on. So, Dave, when I said we needed an expert, are you saying Geraldo Rivera wasn't available? I'm just.
I suppose
Oh.
not. I mean, there's no point in me hiding in the stream since you're just piping audio through from everywhere right now. I mean, might as well just come right out and say hello to everybody because
Hi,
Nick
Dave.
doesn't understand audio buses, apparently.
Yeah.
It's
All right. So
okay. It's okay.
you were saying.
Okay. Something I want your audience to understand, and for some of them this might be old hat, but for other people I want them to consider this. The Shia Sunni separation in the Muslim world uh, is more crucial than most Americans give it credit for. Um, you've got to understand that that the majority of Muslims are Sunnis, and this is in the Middle East and the Muslim populations in places like Indonesia and the Southwest Pacific Islands and all that area. They're mainly Sunni.
Hmm.
Um, and this division of Shia Sunni happened right after the death of Muhammad. It was about who would take over for Muhammad, and certain people wanted some people, and the other group wanted another part of the family to take over.
If I can
With-
suggest, might this
Sure.
be similar to, especially for Christians, if we're trying to understand it, might it be similar to, for example, like the Orthodox who think that there shouldn't be a pope, that wasn't the intent of Christ to have a pope, and so there was like the Greek Orthodox where there's no pope, we don't recognize that, and then the Catholic Church where so then you have the headquarters in something like that, possibly.
It's more than that because for the early Islamic faith, the government was tied up in the religion very
Mhm.
closely. Muhammad was as much a leader of a people as he was a religious leader. So following him was about taking actual hard power of government, not just the soft power that was instituted by the faith leaders. Um, Shia, on the other hand, is a minority everywhere in the Muslim world except for one place, Iran. And the Iranians are Shia for the most part. And I believe there is a extremely large population of Shia in Iraq now. And Iran has been its own country for a very long time. We used to know it as Persia. They are not Arabian, they are Persian. They consider themselves a completely different ethnic group. However, they are Muslim and they can read Arabic script, so they can read the Quran in the original. Um, Iraq was a made up country. It was pieced together out of the colonial powers in the Middle East after World War One. And so Iraq ended up with a very mixed population, Kurds, Shia, and Sunni, and there's the folks that are in the marshes, and it's a mess. It was a country that was just cobbled together by what I call old people and maps equal trouble because they don't understand the conditions on the ground. And so there might be some revanchist feeling in Iran that they want the the Shia population of Iraq to come back to them. There is the Kurdish situation, which is North Iraq, but also parts of Turkey and parts of Syria. When you start getting into the different populations and you start talking about the Kurds, then it gets really messy because all of a sudden you've got to talk about Bashar al Assad in Syria, and you've got to talk about Erdogan in Turkey and how they're being influenced right now by Vladimir Putin, who happens to be the new best friend for the Iranians. We're combining this with what is happening in Israel. Notice that they've said very little and they're being very, very quiet. And I honestly think that from the Israelis, we're not going to hear a lot, but there's a lot that they are doing in a covert style.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, the Arabs, the Saudi Arabians, who are Sunni, they have not liked the Iranians for a long time. In fact, their giant military buildup that's been happening in the past few years is because they want to use it against the Iranians and Yemen and that whole area. Meanwhile, the Iranians have been exporting uh, revolution to places. They're the ones that support Hezbollah. They're the ones that support Palestine, the Palestinians. They're the ones that support separatists in Yemen. Um, it's a mess, and we need to really understand the the religious differences, not just Christian and Muslim, but Shia and Sunni, in order to understand how this is going to work out. And because you're going to find some really weird bedfellows, it's going to be America and the Saudi Arabians and the Israelis against Russia, Syria, Turkey, and Iran, and poor Iraq is stuck in the middle of it.
That. Thank you. I wanted to sleep tonight, but I think I'm gonna be too scared now. Thank you. Um,
Yeah.
because an unusual mix, but that is the kind of mix that I'm sorry, I start thinking Archduke Ferdinand kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
Now, I I I had I had been trying to figure out why Iraq is suddenly such good friends because the Persians, which is Iran, essentially. Iran is Persian. The Iraq is Arab. Now
No,
they've been
not fully.
not
Not
fully. So
fully.
yes, it's actually three. It's Arab, it's Kurd, it's so. One of the things I've been trying to figure out is the Persians and the Arabs have been really trying to murder each other for 3,000 years, and
Oh
um,
no no no. Nope nope
no,
nope nope.
no, oh
No no.
no, you're going to correct what I've been saying for the last 3 days. No.
Yeah, because the Arabs have been off by themselves until the formation of Islam. They were just kind of this
Which was in
trading
about
caravans.
500,
Six 621
you have the exact, I'm
CE.
guesstimating here, like 621. Okay, 621 AD.
621 CE when Muhammad goes to Medina, and it used to be the city of Yathrib. Now it's Medina, and he starts his uh, his uh, prophetic journey, and so that's when the Arab nations started to organize themselves, work together as a group, and that's when they went on the tear. And you had the Umayyad and the Abbasid dynasties who were taking over the Middle East and a huge swath of North Africa, all the way up into Spain by 711. Um, and so the Persians were the ones that were being forced out of places like Baghdad by the Abbasid dynasty, which is the Muslim dynasty. The Muslims will eventually spread into India. Oh, don't get me started on that. But
Oh, and
um,
yeah, well, no, and then yeah, because that's going to cause problems with. That's where Pakistan
yeah,
starts out. Yeah, okay.
but
We'll
the
discuss World War
but the
IV
Persians,
tomorrow.
yeah, but the Persians have claims through Cyrus the Great and the First Persian Empire. They have claims to Baghdad and the whole Mesopotamian region that date back to, oh dear, about the 4th century BCE.
Hmm.
So that's the Persians have a far better uh, um, claim
Claim.
to
Yeah.
that area than the Arabs ever did, as far as just ancient age.
So I
And
want to do two. I want to do two things. I have the video and I can now broadcast that. So I'm going to put up
oh,
the
good. I'd
video
love to see
of
it.
the crash. I can't send it to you. It will be on the live stream if you're watching that. I also sent you a copy to you on DMV versus Twitter, so you can put that up. I'm going to put it up in a
Okay.
minute. But the other question is, well, actually, before we do that, I want to do one more thing, which is so here's been sort of my biggest question, which is they've really been at war for some time. 3,000 years may have been
Mhm.
a bit of an exaggeration, but I wear $400 suits, so I've been prone to exaggerate. Speaking of, I should be wearing it. Oh my God, it's a tradition. But okay, so and Kitty's also sent you a copy, so you got copies coming at you, and I'll play it in a second. But I've been trying to figure out why Iran, or sorry, why Iraq, who has really had troubles with Iran for a very long time, and I think a large part of it is this problem. Has the Shia population in Iraq become large enough or become politically powerful enough to move this? And I know that general that was assassinated was very popular in Iraq. I assume he was Sunni. I assume in particular he was popular with the Sunnis. Is that no,
He was
no, I'm dead
the
wrong.
the general. The Soleimani was Iranian, and he was Shia.
Okay.
There seemed to be, from what I can understand, there is a growing Shia militia movement in Iraq that he was helping to foster. Um, but that, oh gosh, that plays into the 79 revolution in Iran was basically people's militias that overthrew the Shah. And so they've had this very long-standing tradition of building people's militias. Um, and a people's militia is not always an official uniformed service, but it's a way to get a whole bunch of people under your control and have them do all sorts of interesting things for you, like enforce hijab, enforce dress codes, put down rebellions, but they're not a uniformed police group. They're not the army. They are uh, uh, militia, usually men who are organized loosely and who just go do the government's bidding or a general's bidding. Um, and this militia movement is I believe starting up in Iraq now.
This is interesting too because that sounds a bit like what happened in Cuba and how Castro came into power, which, by the way, if I recall, in Cuba, it was the overthrow of an American established
Batista.
government, and which is
It was no, it was corporate established government.
corporate
It was
established.
yes, it was the sugar companies and the banana companies that wanted to keep Batista in power.
Okay, okay, so it wasn't the U.S. government per se.
Well, it was,
Oh,
but
you're
it
playing with
was.
me on Doctor. It's not
No, I'm not
nice to
playing with
play with
you.
the
I'm not
hose.
playing with you, but it was Americans. The American government was truly helping out the corporations that wanted to make sure that their investments in Cuba were safe.
But but we basically had governmental control. Castro's rebel group came in, threw us out, and that's kind of what happened in '79 in Iran,
Oh, yeah. We had in the late 1950s, the CIA had overthrown a duly elected Iranian government and put the Shah in place.
They had democracy. We came in. We put in a dictatorship, the Shah,
Yeah. Hmm.
and then the Ayatollah came in after overthrowing him. So it.
The Shah became very ill and had to leave the country to come to the United States for treatment. That was Carter opened up the United States to the Shah for treatment because he had performed so many hideous acts with the secret police against his own people. He was something of a pariah, and Carter helped him get medical treatment, and that was why there was so much upset about America because they took in the Shah and tried to heal him.
All right. So, yeah. Well, no,
Uh,
no.
uh,
It's actually the reason I find it's because it seems like we have the same pattern repeating itself of rebels establishing their own government in a country after we've overthrown somebody who was duly elected. But why don't I give you a minute to? 'Cause I will get back to that at some point because that also appears to be what's happening in Iraq, and right now we're getting kicked. But at any rate, you should have
mhm.
the clip, and I'm going to play it here. This is the clip of what we are being told is a 737 800, a Ukrainian passenger plane which fell out of the sky about 7 miles out of Tehran, headed for Kiev. So I'm going to play this
Mhm.
here, and let's see. Let's give this a shot, and I will let you play it on your own. Now, this is purportedly. This is on Twitter, which
Right.
is not always the most reliable, but and actually, Fox News and a bunch of other news organizations have actually already aired it. So Fox aired it, so we're going to say it's fake, but it was aired by a couple other organizations, so I think maybe in this case it's legit. So this has been aired repeatedly, actually. So we're going to show this to you now.
هواپیما آتیش گرفته شهریار فردوسیه بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم خدای خود کمک کن زنگ بزن آتیشش هواپیما آتیش گرفته شهریار فردوسیه بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم خدای خود کمک کن
All right, we're going to let that keep playing, I think, for now. That is the technical difficulties. Also, we have breaking news. There's been, I guess, an earthquake in the region as well. Um, I'm glad I don't believe in the Bible because
هواپیما آتیش گرفته
there was a earthquake. I think it was a 5.3 near
شهریار
an
فردوسیه
Iranian power plant
بسم الله
that
الرحمن الرحیم
has struck.
خدای
I'm
خود
not
کمک
kidding.
کن
There was an earthquake, which I do think was also in the Bible. So I'm starting to get okay. Um, I want Ansgar. I want Ansgar. I want him to hold me. I got to tell you this. Um,
زنگ بزن
my
آتیشش
Oh, I'm not good enough.
well, I'm sorry. It's the hat. I
هواپیما
just
It's
آتیش
the hat.
گرفته
and the
It's the
leather.
hat. I
The leather.
understand.
Give me a break.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
Definitely.
فردوسیه
Um, my
بسم الله
she
الرحمن
just
الرحیم
turned she just turned 8.
خدای
You know what
خود
she calls
کمک کن
him?
Yes.
She calls him Unsgar. And
That's good.
Unsgar. So she's got the and she's got the gur. So she goes, Daddy, are you talking to Unsgar? And it's like, that's not his name. Yeah, his name is Ansgar, but I call him Uncle Unsgar. So he loves that. He's on the phone. She's like, wait, tell her you're talking to me. I'm talking to Ansgar. You mean
هواپیما آتیش
Unsgar.
گرفته
It's like, okay. He's like, he loves it because that's even more Nordic. It's like,
شهریار
why didn't I get
فردوسیه
Unsgar?
بسم
All right, so there's been a 5.3. I'm not kidding. I wish I was a 5.3 magnitude earthquake near an Iranian nuclear plant, and we will catch up on that in a minute. But I swear to God, if one more thing happens, I think I'm gonna get a little overwhelmed. What do you think of? I assume you've seen the video. We're gonna keep playing it for now.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
the
not sure. I mean, that's definitely. It's not. You're not looking at what the regular lights on a plane are looking like. It's hard to tell if it's coming towards the cameraman or away from the cameraman. Obviously, someone's going to turn on a camera because something has happened. You know what I'm saying? Um, they got a sound, they got a light. It was unusual, and that's why they pointed their phone up at it. They wouldn't have just said, "Oh, that's the normal flight that goes to Kyiv. Let's videotape it just in case someone shoots it down." Um, so definitely something had happened before to cause that person to turn the camera on, right? I
Right,
mean,
no,
I'm
that's an
guessing.
excellent point. I'm really impressed. The only problem with bringing you on, really,
Yeah.
that I'm starting to realize at this point, is people say I'm smart, but I bring you on, and all of a sudden I look like an idiot because you're like, Nick, don't you think something happened that made them turn the camera on in the first place? I was just like, yes, well.
No, Nick, it's you. I'm just sitting here conspiracy minded and trying to figure out what's going on. I'm still puzzled. I've been for the first time in I don't know how long I turned on the evening news to watch what was going on because I normally don't watch that stuff. Um, and I'm noting all of the footage out in front of the White House. There's no snow. Now, I live about 20 miles southeast of the White House. I have 3 inches of snow at my house.
Huh.
I'm not that much higher in elevation. And I'm trying to figure out why the White House doesn't have snow. Because usually when we have snow, Washington, D.C. gets snow. And we've got 3 inches.
Yeah.
I'm suspicious. I'm starting my own conspiracy theory.
I like that. We will fully support you. We will. You want a website? I'll help you build it, and we'll link to it on it, and you can come on, and we will talk about. You got it. I'm on board. Conspiracies with Dr. Misha. So
Anyway.
let me. This is what I see when I'm looking at it. You're
Mhm.
right. That's a very good point. Somebody obviously turned this on because they already saw something worth recording. Nobody was just holding this
Yeah.
up. So before this starts, something went wrong. And they
Mhm.
knew it because they wouldn't have started recording it. Now it does look to me like a fireball. I mean, it does. Those don't look like regular lights, and you see a trail. There's in my mind, and I've got this full screen on
Mhm.
a second monitor here, and it's a trail. There is a trail. These aren't just regular lights, and then it actually suddenly flares up
Flares
about
up. Yeah.
3 seconds before impact, and then it hits and explodes.
Mhm.
So this does not look okay. There's a flare up, boom. I'm watching it, and then okay,
Right.
about 4 or 5 seconds before that. So there's clearly a catastrophic failure of some kind. The flare up suggests to me that that's the a massive amount of fuel igniting,
Mhm.
and but obviously there's a major fire. To me, in my mind, there's a major fire, and I even see what appears to be something coming off of it on fire. We can maybe get a timestamp for doing that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like the plane is breaking up in the air. So it's hard to believe that this was any of the other kinds of failures we've spoken about.
Right. I haven't. Unfortunately, I'm only seeing it on a very small screen because right now I'm just seeing um, the screen from the feed, and I dare not click away from it. So I'm looking at it on a different
Yeah.
monitor.
Well, we can
I'm
also.
worse with this kind of technology than you are, Nick.
Hey, I used to teach computer science, which probably speaks more to the U.S. education system than my skills, but we'll.
No. Actually, it's because I grew up in a much older time. I used a completely different kind of equipment.
Smoke
I'm
signals,
very
as I recall from your age. Is
yeah.
that about right?
I'm really comfortable with flint, and bronze, and
I had to get you back. I have to get you back. And listen, I'm okay with us being okay, but if you retaliate, then I will attack.
I'm gonna have to find an airliner somewhere to shoot down. Right?
Jesus. Oh,
Ansgar made me do it anyway.
Ansgar made you do it. I like that. Well, we actually have an official policy. People don't believe me, but I wrote up an official policy and posted it on our Discord. If there's a fault on in time, like the crash we just had on the where the server went down, if the stream stops or anything like that, we are required contractually, everybody on in time, to blame the nearest Canadian, and which happens to be our producer, Dave McGuinness. He just usually is the nearest Canadian by happenstance. If the nearest Canadian has plausible deniability or is not available, we blame any staff member with a hat. If he's unavailable, if he's unavailable, I think we were going to blame Kitty, our community director, but I'm a little scared of her. So it turns out it may bypass her and land on me. But that's really sort of a last ditch, like if we've got no other choice. But you're here now, so I think we are going to amend that to add the guest.
It is, yeah. Obviously you're going to have to amend the rule to include me because I can break things faster than just about anyone.
The stream was working
Oh
fine
my
until you
goodness!
showed up.
Oh boy. Okay. BBC News has got. Oh crap.
Oh boy.
BBC News has got crunched up airliner with people wandering around looking at it and body bags.
All right, I'm sorry. So I'm going to need to. I've got a couple voices in my ear, Misha, and I think I missed that. You said the BBC is reporting what?
BBC has now got pictures of the crash as far as on the ground, and it's crunched up airliners, people looking at all the debris, and body bags. So, yuck.
All right, and I did notice. So I finally have gotten access to the live chat, and yeah, it did used to be blame Tony. I got and unfortunately Tony's somebody, and I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Somebody modded Tony, and here's the problem with Tony. Tony's okay. He seems like a decent guy, but here's the thing. He's sort of like a one-man army of trolls. I used to have a lot of trolls that just give me a really hard time. They all vanished and got replaced by one guy, and he just everywhere, Discord, this thing, and somebody just modded him. I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna be okay.
You're giving your trolls wrenches. Okay, well,
I didn't do it.
You've been reading Doris Kearns Goodwin, the cabinet of what was the book she wrote about Lincoln's cabinet?
The book that she no. Yeah, but the one where no, this isn't the one where I'd rather have them in the tent.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
That was the one.
Okay, fine,
yeah.
fine. Keep that to yourself. We don't need to.
Yeah.
I don't need to give him any ideas. Next thing he's gonna start urinating on in time. Okay, you just gave him that idea. Thank you, Doctor. You've been a huge help.
You're welcome.
Ever since you've been on the stream, we crashed. And there was an earthquake while you were on the stream too.
I know. What do I say? I bring entertainment everywhere I go.
Oh, so and then the other thing might be nice to do is to see if we've got any super chats. I haven't been able to, and please. Normally I say.
Someone would super chat this?
Oh, jeez. I quit. This is the real reason for this is that I'm gonna hide. I'm not here. There's nobody. Do you wanna host a show? Do you wanna?
No. I'm not. I haven't started drinking yet.
Yet. I'm surprised. Normally I get to start that before they come on, but okay.
Anyway, oh, it's late, Nick. Why are we still up?
We're still up. Well, there's a couple of things that at a minimum I think I'd like to cover, and it's good. I mean, I've wanted to have you on to cover some of the. Every time I sit there and say, "We got some breaking news. Let's get a hold of Dr. Misha," and then it's like, "Oh, yeah, but we just had more breaking news, and we just never get ahead of it." So let's sort of do a rundown. And I mean, I did want to cover with you. I mean, so far, the number of things that we need to cover. Iran, Donald Trump tweeted that he's going to attack 52 sites in Iran if they attack us, which they did. The sites were cultural sites, so that would make it, if I understand correctly, a war crime, what he's proposing, because we're in the new era of Trump. We didn't actually consider that worth breaking news that the President of the United States was advocating war crimes, because he's done that several times anyway. Then he denied access to their top ambassador, their foreign minister, was coming to the United States, not to the United States actually, he was coming to the UN. The UN is its own territory. It is not U.S. soil. And by law, we cannot block anyone from going into the UN unless they pose an imminent threat, I think, to the U.S. I think there's one or two exceptions. We cannot do that. That's a violation of law. That is a violation of the founding codes of the UN.
UN Charter, yeah.
Yeah. So where do you think we are with that? What do you think is going to happen with that?
That's just kind of bluster to me. That's the keeping the guy out of the UN. Iran does not need to have this particular man seated in the UN to complain. You know who should be complaining, and who I believe does have a representative already at the UN, is Iraq. We might have killed an Iranian official, but we did it on Iraqi soil. We violated their sovereignty as much as we violated the moral laws of killing somebody. It's Iraq who should be complaining to the UN about what the Americans did. I mean, we should not be this blocking him at the border. This is such petty, vindictive little stuff that we have now that we now have become connoisseurs of what Trump does. This petty, vindictive, ugly little things. The idea of 52 cultural places, meaning the 52 hostages from 1978. I realize this was the last decade that a certain president's primary sexual organs actually worked without medication. And I know this was the heyday for him, but really, 1978, you don't go back that well. I guess you do.
Hey, listen, he was upset about Canada burning down the White House.
And
which
it
is the same thing.
Canada,
It's the identical thing, except actually that one at least didn't even happen. Canada did not burn down the White House. You don't go to Trudeau and you don't get corrected by the Prime Minister of Canada on U.S. history. But okay, that aside. So I think here's my thing on this. It's obvious. I mean, if I were them, what I would do is I would have him still talk, but I'd have him do it with an iPhone. So I would just say, the United States has illegally barred us from entering, but he's still going to talk, but he's going to do it. And you just hold up the phone and you do that, and you look like an idiot. But I think it's actually a very powerful motive, or it's a very powerful sort of image that, the evil empire U.S. hasn't allowed him, but he's getting through anyway. So I think you've handed them that. I agree. There's plenty of people already there who can say the message, but it strikes me as really quite serious blocking him. But every time I say something's really serious, and it's like, oh my God, you're like, okay, Nick, here's the reality. Chill the fuck out. But
No,
anyway,
no, no. I think if we were dealing with normal world, with the way governments and soft power and hard power and all this used to work, um, then it would have been a big deal. But now it's just Tuesday afternoon.
it's just Tuesday. Please don't remind me. It's just Tuesday. I really don't need to hear.
So so
فردوسی
so how
بسم الله
how do
الرحمن الرحیم
we
خدای
get in
خودتون
front of it? We can't. You cannot get in front of a juggernaut. You can just stay out of its way and let it do its thing, except that the juggernaut has their fingers on the
زنگ بزنم پیشش
button for
On the
the
button for send on
yeah
Twitter. Yeah, that's what I was
yeah
thinking too.
yeah
It's the Twitter that he's weaponized.
شهریار
Okay, so
فردوسی
I think that's. um,
بسم الله
I think
الرحمن
that's,
الرحیم
and yeah, we already told you about what happened to ProLib, which I think we're very proud of because he's sort of regular on the show. But it looks like he's permanently suspended on Twitter
yeah
for reporting somebody who was being abusive and threatening people. But at any rate,
yeah
زنگ بزنم
so,
پیشش
and I got a little more information on the plane that I wanted to go over, but the
هواپیما پیش
blocking of
گرفته
I'm just wondering if the UN's going to say or do anything
شهریار
about it because I think
فردوسیه
this is unprecedented. I don't think we've actually done
بسم
that
الله الرحمن
before,
الرحیم
and I think that's going to
خدای
be very
خودتون
chilling.
رو
And it
نگهدار.
does, I think you're right, it gives them
um
imagery that they can use of being victimized by the US.
didn't we try to block Ahmadinejad, the former president of Iran, from coming to speak
زنگ بزنم پیشش
at the big September gatherings?
I remember us blocking him in some way, but I don't think we
Yeah.
actually. I
هواپیما
think
پیش
what we
I
did
گرفته
don't
was I think we did something else sneaky, but I don't think we barred. I mean, I think we
شهریار
found another way to.
فردوسیه
But it's illegal to do
بسم الله
this. I mean,
الرحمن الرحیم
illegal actually isn't quite
خدای
correct, but
خودتون رو نگهدار.
all right. Well, yeah, I have something new here. So what we've got here is, according to the Iranian Road and Transportation Ministry, the plane had taken off when quote a fire
زنگ بزنم
struck
پیشش
one of the engines. The pilot of the aircraft then lost
هواپیما
control of the
پیش
plane,
گرفته
sending it crashing to the ground.
شهریار فردوسیه
Now, this might,
بسم
I mean,
الله
if I
الرحمن
saw
الرحیم
a fire going up
خدای
towards a
خودتون رو
plane, I
نگهدار.
might take out my phone and start recording things. So,
Mhm.
I mean, a fire striking the engine also does not, in my humble and inexperienced view, does not sound like a technical issue.
زنگ بزنم پیشش
I suppose there was a technical issue if something struck the engine, but I don't think it's a technical failure on the plane.
هواپیما پیش گرفته
Well, uh,
شهریار
our
فردوسیه
suspicions lie in the fact that they came out with this
بسم الله
excuse
الرحمن الرحیم
so soon after the
خدای
crash.
خودتون رو نگهدار.
I
Yes.
think that's where I think we are justifiable in being suspicious when they have such a ready answer, which to my mind says it was somebody who accidentally shot it down.
زنگ بزنم پیشش
To my mind, it reeks of accident. How about that?
I think that makes a lot of sense. I agree too. It was the
هواپیما پیش گرفته
having the answer of, oh, it was this almost before just sort of
شهریار
sounds like it was prepared.
فردوسیه
And there was a number of other, I'm trying to think of another historical example
بسم الله
where
الرحمن
that's
الرحیم
happened, where
خدای
either there
خودتون رو
was,
نگهدار.
somebody important died or, something very big happened. And there was an explanation that came out before anyone even had a chance to ask what happened, really.
Mhm.
And this does kind of smack of that. So
زنگ بزنم
I
پیشش
appreciate. Let me sort of try to catch everybody up and maybe start putting a pin on this. Kitty
هواپیما پیش
was the
گرفته
one actually who notified me of the crash, and obviously I felt that
شهریار
this was
فردوسیه
critical breaking news, and it sounds like
بسم
at
الله
least it was
الرحمن
an
الرحیم
accident. But I mean,
خدای
if
خودتون رو
I had
نگهدار.
to guess right now, I would say anti-aircraft fire from Iran is what I would guess. Does
Mhm.
that sound like a decent guess to you?
My because if it was shot down by anybody
زنگ بزنم
else,
پیشش
if it was us that did it, you don't think that they
هواپیما پیش
wouldn't
گرفته
use that?
Well,
immediately.
yeah, that's true. That's a very good point. I hadn't even thought of it that way. That's a much better point than the one I was thinking, which is an okay point, which was we, as of this moment, weren't engaging anything over there. We may engage something, but we aren't actually engaging yet. And if we did engage, I would think it would be at a closer range. They've got aircraft up there, would be engaging those aircraft probably before we started just taking things out long range over the airport. Well, I mean, that
Sure.
would be hitting the military base. But I like yours is much better, which is if it was us, they wouldn't be saying it was an accident.
Yeah. Well, I can, unless we are trying to send a message by having airplanes fall out of the sky and having the earth shake underneath their feet, that would be pretty good as far as weaponry. Um, I'd be impressed if we could do that. I mean, that beats atomic weapons all to hell.
It doesn't beat
Um,
Space Force. Doesn't beat Space Force.
no, that doesn't beat Space Force, of course not. Space Force. But yeah, just that these are happening right now. This is insane. Um, and what surprised me out of today, as crazy as today was, that the guy in the White House canceled his big announcement tonight. I found that to be the most shocking of
Well,
anything that's happened today.
and he did cancel it. So why do you think he canceled? Why do you think he didn't? I mean, this is a great opportunity for him to be in front of the cameras. Great opportunity for him to just talk about, we will, yeah. And I know he's known for being reserved and deliberate and thoughtful, but I mean, so this obviously is in character, I suppose, that he would take a break. But no, so why do you think he bailed on an opportunity to seize on this?
Well, according to one thing I read, the Sean Hannity came down on one side of the issue, and Tucker Carlson came on down on the other side of the issue, and so consequently, he had decided, well, I'll just go to bed and
just,
wait until Fox and
I
Friends
wish
tell
you
me
were
what to
kidding.
do tomorrow morning.
I wish you were kidding, but for those of us who aren't aware, he does watch Fox News, and he does what they tell him. I mean, we have seen this. They have said, gee, I wish the president would, and then 10 minutes later, I've decided I'm going to. And he says later that he was watching Fox News. People see him, I mean, he's literally getting his, oh, God.
His marching orders.
Yeah, his marching orders. Well, he just, oh my God. And they know that. So, okay, so I honestly have to believe now Tucker Carlson actually speaks with him and advises him, if I remember correctly. Is that the pundit who speaks with
No,
him?
I believe Sean Hannity.
You're correct, it was Hannity. It's
the
Hannity.
one.
Yes.
But Tucker Carl, from what I understand, I have not seen it, so I cannot report this from anything but secondhand, that Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson did not agree tonight. But Tucker comes on before Sean, I think. So. Or does it come on after?
Yeah. And I
Anyway,
wish this was a joke, but this is a serious discussion. Okay.
But for him to give up a chance to go before the American people and present bluster at the very moment that he should be in front of the American audience, but to give that up, to give that platform up and walk away from it and maybe go to bed, or is he incapable of getting in front of cameras tonight? I'm going to add that little question into it too. Is he sick?
That's a good question. Yeah. Well, and it was actually awfully sudden, too. It's just sort of like, okay, he's in bed. And I'm just like, and you had said earlier that he's in bed, but I was like, well, listen, if I would think if this were shut down, they'd wake him up. I mean, I woke up. I was basically in bed And
Yeah.
I was, oh God, I was talking to like a really good friend, and I was just like, oh, hey, it's been years. It's so great to hear you. Listen, there was a Ukrainian plane got shot down. I gotta go. It's like, really? It's like, yeah, believe it or not, because I'm insane. So and Ansgar had said earlier that he thinks that Trump may throw Pompeo under the bus and say that he was responsible for the original attack. Now, the immediate rational response to that is, well, no, he's already taken credit for the. I mean, Trump has basically already said we did this and here's why, and this was a good thing. But he changes his mind all the time, and people forget what he said 24 hours ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pompeo, the New York Times came out in their article about this. The New York Times said that Pompeo was the official in the White House that was pushing for the assassination. Um, and so, uh, Trump was he Pompeo was the one that was pushing for bluster. Now, do you remember how much trouble Madeleine Albright, Secretary Albright, got in the 1990s when she said, we really probably need to drop some bombs on the Serbs in Kosovo, um, and people were shocked that a Secretary of State, a person who should be um, the head diplomat, was all of a sudden saying maybe we should drop a couple bombs. Well, imagine if the Secretary of State comes out and thinks we should just do extra legitimate, extra legal killing of people just out of hand. Kissinger didn't even do this, or at least
If
admit
Kissinger
to
didn't
doing
do
it.
it, you've really crossed a line.
Yeah. Well, Kissinger wouldn't admit to doing it. How about that? But
Okay, yeah,
Pompeo
yeah.
was out and loud about his support. Um, and really, I think Trump's going to throw Pompeo under the bus if this starts looking bad, which it definitely is.
If it
Um,
starts, all right, you and I have some different, we're going to have to discuss our vocabulary later. If this starts looking bad, okay, yes.
yeah, that Pompeo's going to get thrown under the bus. Anybody remember Benghazi?
Yeah.
Sorry, is it too soon?
No.
Oh,
Well, I'll say there's been a few complaints, and this is legit. Listen,
yeah.
I was getting upset about people making jokes
Sorry.
about.
Okay.
Don't apologize. I was getting
Sorry.
upset about people making jokes about nuclear war earlier, and I still don't. I mean, I don't think you should joke about dropping nuclear weapons on people. On the flip side,
No.
we've been making a few jokes here that are probably a little soon. Ansgar and I have talked about this. This is a serious show, and this is we try to be respectful and do a good job. But on the flip side, a little humor usually I think does help disarm rather difficult situations. And I think this isn't easy for anyone, especially since we're doing it at 1:30 a.m. And these are difficult things to discuss and go over. So
Yeah.
I hope our audience will forgive us making a few inappropriate jokes that really are inappropriate. But on the flip side, I think we're all tired and we're trying to. I said earlier, it's either laugh or cry, and I try not to cry on stream because, oh
No.
my God, my wife put that as her ringtone. She's like, oh my God, can you believe it? Yeah, thanks, hon. I feel so supported. You know, you know,
No.
the thing about my wife is that, and I probably shouldn't be airing this stuff on. Are we still live, Dave? Did the stream go? No. Okay. I didn't say any of that. At any rate, so yeah, please forgive us the occasional humor. And I do want to have one or two other questions I do want to ask you before I think we start to run this down. But did I cut you off in the middle of something, or?
No, I'm just looking at the very fact that we started screaming 116 minutes ago. We've got 30 thumbs up, 5 thumbs down, and we've still got 75 people watching. And it's 1:20 in the morning,
I know.
1:30 in the morning, and we started airing today at 10:30 a.m.
Yes, I did. That's right.
talking
Because you've
about
been on.
flip
How many
flying.
times have you been on today? I know. Well, and then we
And
did
I
the.
was in all of the live chats too. I don't know if you realize that. I
I
was
saw you
typing
there.
furious.
Um, and the Yeah, well, I know, and I mean, we had 200 twice. One of the times we were under a siege by trolls who were for That was we actually had a holy war against us. That was fun.
Mhm.
And then the other one was complete legit. So no, I think we're doing well. And I swear to God, though, I told Kitty, who is our community director, she's the one who broke to me. By the way, guess what? I was like, oh, listen, I'm going to bed, but I'd love to chat with you. I got 5 minutes. What's up? Oh, a Ukrainian plane crashed outside of Tehran. Like, oh God, thanks. I don't know that I could cope with that in 5 minutes. Now I told her I don't blame her, and she was constantly apologizing. I was like, how can I blame her for the thing? But just so you know, I totally blame her. And I swear to God, I'm blocking her on my phone. I'm blocking Ansgar. Oh my God.
I should, honestly, I have been trying to work on my syllabus for classes that start next Monday. And I'm really looking at the events of today thinking, why bother? We're not going to make it through the semester. It's just not going to happen. We're in the middle of World War III. We can kiss the internet goodbye by sometime next week. All of our cushy middle class lifestyles, such as they are, will become crashing down, and we're going to be resorting to a Lord of the Flies atmosphere within a month.
Oh God. And now I
And
have.
I'm worried about my pedagogy. Um,
well, like you said, I mean, I'm glad you're here because it's better than grading papers. Um, no, I don't hold a grudge. I'm not. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't hurt, Doctor. It's okay. It's okay. You could just. Oh, I understand. I understand.
I'm now I'm being referred to as the deer whacker.
Okay.
Um,
The deer whacker. Yeah. Well. Okay. Okay. Well, I am. We're gonna have to do
you
a.
know.
Well, we've got merch now, and we've
Mhm.
got Ansgar merch. We've got merch from when we had on because Cyrus's story of when he engaged in kidnapping, um,
Mhm.
which wasn't he was in a and this was actually it was a mostly voluntary deconversion. Um,
Mhm.
but one of the things we're fascinated by is deconversions in general, but the ones that and it's difficult to discuss because you can get into thorny legal issues, but forced deconversion. So somebody who is in a cult, the cult is treating them phenomenally poorly, but they don't see it that way. They actually
Mhm.
think, that it's okay to be beat, to be whatever's going on, and then trying to remove someone from that environment so you can start to deconvert them. Now, that is not what Cyrus did. He actually really did a genuine rescue, but it was someone in a very difficult spot, and it was very conflicted. We did an excellent show on it. I suggest you recommend it. I suggest you go. You should also go tell all your friends. But I suggest you view it. But we have a T-shirt from that, because he was just like, I was like, so did you get any help? He names all these YouTube personalities they got with him. So it's like, okay, so you're gonna go rescue someone. You're gonna try to save their life. What do you want to do? Call the cops? No. Call the military? No. Call Rainbow Six? No. I'm gonna bring in the YouTubers. So we just got to you bring in you got a problem. If no one else can help, send in YouTube. Um, now I have a
Yeah,
there is an
I've also
interest
heard that
there is a
that Dr. Misha.
there is
I'm
a
Yes, I'm
sorry.
here.
I was
sorry.
just going to say that Dr. Misha's also been called a pineapple apologist.
Yeah, we've
Mhm.
got a whole list of
Yeah.
things that she's been called, and we're certainly going
It,
to
it,
so we're gonna get you merch. That was what I was gonna say. We're gonna get you merch.
I
You're
want
good.
merch.
You're
Yeah,
gonna
and
get
I
merch, and
want
you're
a
gonna
cut
get
of the merch.
chipmunk genocide. But I think there's like pineapple apologist, and now deer whacker.
I
Yeah,
want
deer whacker.
I want a shot. I want a T-shirt. You artists out there, I want a T-shirt of a deer on fire
Just
running
get the deer
through the
whacking.
forest
Oh my
with
god.
with someone in
Oh
a
my god. We're gonna
firefighter
get.
uniform chasing after it with a shovel. I want this T-shirt.
We're gonna get it. We're gonna get it, and I'm sure somebody watching this is gonna like draw it and send it to you on Twitter, and we'll link you in it. But we'll get Ansgar to do it, and we're gonna do it. And the ASPCA is gonna be all over us, but I don't care. It's totally worth it. Um,
That That's too glorious to think of.
yeah.
To not go for it. Anyway, we're supposed to be talking about um, seriously, Nick, we're supposed to be talking about a
Well,
plane crash.
yeah. And I was going to get back to that. I had two things I wanted to cover, then I'm hoping we can put a pin on it and go to bed. But so the two things I wanted to discuss. Now, we had talked about how there's been some mirroring of actions. So when Iran has been talking about what we've done, or when they've been talking about what they're doing in retaliation to what we've done, they've been using the same language that Trump was using. Trump put out just an American flag in the tweet. They put out just an Iranian flag, and then Trump was talking about retaliation, and then they used the same language and mirrored it back. So they are literally trolling Trump, which is really fucking amazing that we have a troll war between two countries in addition to. But here's the interesting thing. I think some of this about the 52 hostages, where he's doing these callbacks to all these things, and there keeps being references to in the past. I want you to listen to this. 2 days ago, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani made a tweet referencing the U.S. shootdown of the Iranian flight 655 in 1988.
88, yeah.
Yeah, he did that 2 days ago. He referenced that shootdown.
Wow. Wow.
Now, at the time, there was no connection between that crash and the political events that were happening 2 days ago.
No. Isn't that weird?
I think that's kind of interesting. I don't know what it means. I'm not saying that we can draw anything from that, but yeah, that's interesting.
Oh my gosh. The idea that the Iranians shot down a Ukrainian passenger jet in order to blame it on the Americans.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you repeat what you said?
What? That the Iranians shot down this passenger jet in order to blame it on the Americans.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's another one that's a complete possible coincidence. And here's the other thing that has to be remembered. One of the things I really enjoy thinking about and discussing is determinism and chaos theory, and the idea that very small things can end up having big consequences over a period of time. But there's a reverse to that, which is if you take a very large number of things, you can go back and point to any one and say, well, gee, this caused it, or this. So you could say, literally, a butterfly caused this hurricane. And if that butterfly hadn't been there, we wouldn't have had a hurricane that killed 30 people. So if you look back over all the tweets of anyone in the Iranian government recently, one of them is going to correlate in a very strange way to some modern event. That's just going to happen. Mm-hmm. The question is that one of those coincidences, or is that something else? But it's interesting. So I'm just really glad we have that to discuss, because yeah, that's cute.
Well, this kind of plays into my research. We are living in a moment in time when everything you say is reified. It's realistic. It can be searched. It can be recorded. It can be played back perfectly. There was a time when a politician could say one thing at one whistle stop, and at the next whistle stop say something completely different. And because those two regions did not talk to each other, nobody knew that this politician was contradicting themselves. But now we've got Trump has been tweeting so frequently and so often. It is not unusual for him to tweet something and someone go back to 2012 or 2014 and find him saying either the exact opposite thing or saying something like that about Obama or whatever. I mean, it's so having this unimaginable volume of exact statements and being able to cut and paste and put them together, I think we're going to drive ourselves insane. Um, I think we need to start forgetting some of these things, but to try to match, to make all these correlations happening into something that looks like causation is nuts.
I yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that is one of the things I find that absolutely fascinating. And yeah, causation, correlation, and how, here's just a quick logical one, and then I am going to start to wrap this up. But the straw that broke the camel's back. I really
Hmm.
like that expression. I think that's a good expression. But there is a fallacy in that. That straw didn't break the camel's back any more than any other straw already on that camel's back. And if you had
Right.
removed one of the other straws, that final straw that broke the camel's back wouldn't have done it. And I know this is just an expression, but my point is about how we understand what is causal and what we blame. If we blame that final straw,
Hmm.
oh, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and if that hadn't happened, would have been okay. That's true. But if any of the other straws hadn't been there, would also have been okay. And we
Hmm.
tend to blame the most recent one the most, but in reality, they all have equal blame. And some cases,
Hmm.
if you're smart and you know how to look, you can find one of the other straws and say, hey, we blocked that one in the future, and we're just as good. But however it works, when you're talking about how people blame things, especially in society, in politics, but also just, even with friends or whatever, we do tend to blame that final straw when really all of them have an equal burden. And I think that plays in part into, we talk about what people are saying on their timelines and how, well, if this person hadn't said this one thing, it wouldn't have triggered a war. Well, that's true,
Yeah.
except that if the person before him hadn't have said something, it wouldn't have inspired that person to. And what's really interesting is, and I also like to think about good and evil, um, but good and evil, as much as I can tell, is usually where you stop in that causal chain. So if you decide to say that this person had bad motives when doing something, and they are the cause of it, then you can say something was a bad event or caused by bad motivations. But you could go a step further and find somebody else that was just as equally culpable and say, well, really, they were part of that causal chain. So you could say it was a good event. So really, framing something as good or bad is as much as trying to pick what you're going to say the actual cause was. You can pick
Hmm.
the cause, you can blame a person, you can blame a nation, you can blame and you can frame it as, hey, World War II was actually great for these reasons. And if you pick the right reasons, that's an easy argument to make. That's a really easy argument to make if you pick the right
Sure.
reasons. Um, so actually, before I do, who you have to know who, because we're getting into this, Misha. This is fun. We're gonna have to get back to the news, but let me get into this last
Uh,
one. You know who Giuseppe Zangria? Jesus, I forget his last name. Assassinated the mayor of Chicago. Oh my God,
oh
tell me you know this.
no, I don't.
He assassinated the mayor of Chicago. He got on a chair during I think it was a DNC convention to honor the newly elected President Roosevelt. And he got on a chair, took out a rifle, and no, actually, it wasn't a rifle. I think it was a pistol, but he fired a shot at Roosevelt. Missed Roosevelt, hit the mayor of Chicago, but he was trying to hit Roosevelt. If he had hit Roosevelt, Roosevelt would have um, been killed. His VP was, as VPs were at the time, actually of the opposing party, because the VPs were whoever came second, which was usually the opposing party. And that man
Hmm.
had been in Congress and opposed the New Deal and opposed all of the legislation that in the end got us out of the Depression. If
Hmm.
Roosevelt had been successfully assassinated, the New Deal would have been scuttled by his VP. Without the New
Hmm.
Deal, we would not have been in a position to recover from the attack on Pearl Harbor and to assist the British when they started to need our help in World War II. We likely would have lost on the Pacific and not been able to engage in Germany or in Europe until after Britain had fallen. And then we would not have been able to successfully beat Germany. So the reason we don't all speak Japanese or German today is because Giuseppe accidentally picked a chair that had one wobbly leg, and he accidentally assassinated the mayor of Chicago.
Love it.
Yeah, I thought you would. I think
Yeah.
there's a
I mean,
reason. You know what? I have a secret. I kind of think you
yeah.
enjoy coming on this show. That's what
Yeah.
I think. That's what I think. I'm going to stand by that.
Yeah.
So to reiterate, and I
Oh,
think, oh yes, please.
you have a couple of super chats.
Oh Jesus, I do. Thank you. I don't have access to the super chat system without putting all that up. So let me get. I can look at that. Um, Hold on one second. So thank you for the thank you, and I do apologize. Super chats, we really appreciate that. We've been obviously very busy, and all of us working very, very hard, and so thank you very much. And this has been, we're in the middle of changing systems to make things a lot easier. We're going to switch. For those of you who know the technical lingo, we're switching from OBS to vMix, but the OBS allows all of us to broadcast, but this system was set up for Ansgar, and the problem was once it realized I didn't have a hat, nothing worked. So as to the super chats, which we do have some, and we also have our Patreon hangout will be coming up day after next.
No, tomorrow.
Oh, Jesus,
It's Wednesday.
today is Wednesday. So, oh my God. And Dr. Misha will be there because she is a
Yeah.
patron.
I hope.
So
I hope.
I hope the world hasn't ended by then. But so please join us for today's. It's today's because it's past 1. So join us for our Patreon hangout if you would like, and we really do. We like to talk with our patrons and we listen to them. We don't always. Well, no, we hear them. We try to listen to. So please consider joining. Thank you, Fourth Dimensional Jake, $2. If intentional, there would already be accusations. Well, that's what the fucking smart people figured out before I did. That was exactly. I was like, I wonder why I didn't put that one together. Stone Butt. I love the ones that have really. Thank you, Stone Butt, for making me say that on the air. For $10. These recent has me terrified. I've been saving up for a new workstation PC, but I'm putting those plans on hold and saving up for a small arsenal in case things really go south. Oh, well, they'd have to go pretty south for us to be invaded, but yeah, I'm with you, pal. I'd buy the PC and just try to enjoy your last few, whatever we've got. I do, and I'll ask Dr. Misha about that in a second. I'm going to check and see if we have any other super chats, but thank you very much. We really do appreciate it. This is a little tough. We really do. You try not to do clickbait or anything. We've been accused of clickbait on every single one of ours. Like, no, this is what's happening.
That's what our show is about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and we managed to beat actually most of the major news networks on the original attack. So people are like, this isn't happening. Yeah, it is. But so here's the thing. A lot of people have been saying World War III, World War III, and I think when we're talking causality, and I think this is why actually all of this really does dovetail very nicely into, because we're talking about what can cause a war and so on and so forth. I think it's important to point out 2 things. One, yeah, every major world war starts like this, very much like this. This is how they start. Having said that, things like this happen all the time and don't escalate into a. So just because we do get, and I remember very well, I was a teacher when I was teaching high school when it was India, I believe, that released deployment authority of nuclear weapons to commanders in the field. That's fucking big, because if one of those commanders decides to deploy a nuclear weapon against Pakistan, Pakistan's treaty with Russia would force them to engage and defend them. If they did that, our treaty with India would force us to engage. Now, the thinking was that this was just a ploy, that this was but that's a huge thing. But huge things do happen, and they happen without world wars. So there are people who are saying this is how all world wars start, and I actually think they're right. This is. But that doesn't mean that that's what we're seeing here. So there are people who are very concerned, and there are people who aren't as concerned. What are you thinking about this?
Um, okay. As far as a world war, you don't trip into a world war. You don't go into it accidentally. Uh, World War One, especially, all of the earliest participants were ready and waiting for it to happen
Really?
because the preponderance of the idea was um, all of this is too crazy. If we have a war, at least that's going to sort everything out, and it's going to be a quick war, and it's going to be over by Christmas. They always use that line.
Yeah.
Um, but but here's the thing: the combatants were prepared, except for the United States, but we didn't join until 1917, so it really doesn't matter that much. But World War II, those who were aggressors were prepared and on the move. The only people who got caught off guard were the people who were being overrun, the Poles and the Belgians again. Um, and eventually the French, although the French were prepared, they were just prepared in the wrong place. Um, Little accidents don't make big wars. You don't get a big war without serious logistics. There's an old saying that says that the armchair appreciator of wars looks at strategy, and a real general looks at logistics.
Yeah.
How do you move the army? How does the army move in the field? And how does it get resupplied, et cetera, et cetera. So understanding it not in terms of, oh, we're going to put the cannons here and we're going to put the infantry here and we're going to have the cavalry, and you're thinking about the little risk games. It's not like that at all. It's how do you get these many men and women in the field, and how do you feed them, and everything like that. That's what makes those bases in Iraq so important. Those were a little bit of logistics, um, and they took forever to get in there and get them established. Um, but they are more of a sign of a war than just building missiles. If you can kind of understand me. So just little weird things and little accidents don't make the wars. It's participants being willing to throw everything into the war.
Um, that's funny. I will tell you that makes a lot of sense. I think that's very counterintuitive to how history is taught.
Hmm.
And kind of one of the things I like about history is because I do like those coincidences as we were talking. But
Hmm.
it makes a lot of sense. I am a part of me is concerned. We do have the logistics, and if I understand correctly, and I've said this for some time, and I think there's going to be a we could write 16 books on this, but part of what caused the Roman Empire to fall was that they had overextended their military and that they had far more than they could really support without active wars. When they had active wars, they could function. They didn't. One of my concerns
Hmm.
has been that we own 95% of all the foreign military bases in the world. Our budget is roughly equal to, actually pretty close to equal to the combined military budgets of every other country in the world. Most of those others are our allies, and that does encourage us to go to war, and we want to use it, and we think about using it because it's always around. Um, have we established some of that infrastructure and logistics already? And isn't that part of why we're talking about this? Now, maybe Russia hasn't, and I think China has, but not in a way to engage here. They've done it through their navy. So, what are your thoughts?
Are you sure our military industrial complex is everything about fighting, or more about keeping all of these very expensive companies in business, making this exotic hardware and keeping these plants open and building the niftiest army we can get? I'm not so sure that the fighting is the main thing.
And that is
I think
why the little dirty little secret you have is that you like being on this show. The dirty little
yeah.
secret we have, we absolutely love having you
I'm trying to covert everything.
on. Well, no, I think that's a good, and I've made a very similar argument to that before, so I think that that sort of wraps it up nicely for me. I don't, I mean, we've got a lot of military in a lot of places, but yeah, and we move stuff a lot. We're very good at moving stuff, and
Um, I live in Northern Virginia.
mhm.
I live, 20 miles out of. I am surrounded by the Beltway Bandits. If you remember Jimmy Carter using that term for all the people who make money off of the federal government. Um, every single skyscraper, every single tall building I see around me is nothing but support for the government. Um, the fortunes here, the vast amount of money that's being spent on everything, um, boggles the mind. Um, and most of America does not see that at all. But you start adding up all of the salaries of all of these very wealthy people around here, and they're all based on the fact that we want to keep, this kind of equipment in Germany or in Indonesia or wherever we have bases. Um, it's our bread and butter up here.
Oh. All right. Well, Doctor, it is a pleasure as always, and thank you very much for giving us your time, especially at this late hour. And
Thank you so much for inviting me. I had a lot of fun, Nick. This has just been a real pleasure. And yeah, just call.
yeah,
I'll be on. I would be happy to be back on.
and
It's
I
been fun.
appreciate that. Well, that's why you. Hey, you are. When I say correspondent, I'm not making that up. You're one of our correspondents. We have a number of them, but you're one of our go-to ones, especially since apparently. So, but it has been nice discussing the end of the world with you. There's nobody else I'd rather discuss it with. So, thank you so much for joining us. For people who are joining us and asking why we're doing our fourth stream of the day, we have had breaking news. Ukrainian 737 fell out of the sky about 7 miles out of Tehran. It fell out of the sky, crashed. All about 180 people on board are now confirmed dead. The plane crashed at a time when we do know that it was in the vicinity. We had just had several attacks coming from missiles coming from Tehran, striking U.S. air bases in the Green Zone in Iraq. What I suspect was a CAP, a combat air patrol, had deployed from the UAE and was in the air. So we believe were some Iraqi warplanes in the air at the time. We don't know what caused this plane to go down. Initially, a organization that I still don't understand who they are, but it appears to be a aviation safety board of some kind, and maybe Iranian, has come out and said that this was an accident, not an accident, sorry, a technical malfunction aboard the plane. We have been showing the video of this plane crashing. It appears to me very much like the plane was already on fire before coming down, and we have at least one report of it had been reported that a fire came up, struck the engine, and took the plane down. At this point, we've had Dr. Griffith on with us, and she has reminded us something, which is that, of course, they have a lot of anti-aircraft in that vicinity, especially near the airport. The reason is because one of the things that we do during a war is we bomb the airports first to try to damage their logistics. Mr. Griffith has brought up repeatedly and is important. So they have a lot of anti-aircraft guns in that vicinity, and I think a reasonable guess as to what happened, and I think Dr. Griffith has given us enough information that I think we can make this guess as to what may have happened is an anti-aircraft mistakenly thought that this was a hostile airplane and shot it down. That kind of thing has happened before. We don't know what happened. I am really rather confident that it was not a mechanical failure. If it was, some people in our live chat have said, no, the U.S. probably shot it down. Dr. Griffith has reminded us that the U.S. does have that capacity, even without planes in the air. Warships in the area do have that kind of range. But if that had been the case, I strongly suspect that they'd have come out and said it and not said it was technical difficulties. So whatever has happened, I don't think it was shot down by the U.S. Any number of things, but this doesn't strike me as a technical issues don't usually bring down planes in a ball of fire. And that's what I'm seeing here. Thank you all for joining us for our fourth broadcast of the day. If you would like to be annoyed by your notifications coming up and saying, hey, there's another global emergency and In Time is going to talk about it, please do like and subscribe. Because that's the way you're going to get the notifications of when we're going live, and we've been doing a lot of that. We said this 3 days ago. I think there's going to be a lot of live shows this week, or a lot of breaking news shows. Yeah, I don't know whose idea it was to do breaking news, but that person should be shot. Let's not do that. Dave, don't put that on the agenda. Anyways, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Griffith. Thank you, those of you in the live chat. Thank you, patrons, who we'll be seeing later on today in the private stream. We'll be putting that up on Patreon and letting all you guys know. I look forward to chatting with you. I think it's going to be an interesting discussion this week. And thank you, those of you who have super chatted. We really do appreciate those of you who support us, and those of you who just came in and chatted in the live chat. I think this is important, and I enjoy doing it. Certainly, also, it's the feedback and chatting with you guys and people who take the time to do it. So thank you all very much for joining us and for putting through the technical difficulties, and we will talk to you very soon, I'm sure.
Good night.
Bye.